We're going to dive headfirst into playing around with Spring Data JPA and CockroachDB, but we're not going to do that yet until we get on board Felipe here, my good buddy. How's it going?
Hey Greg, how you doing, guys? Happy to be here and excited to see this new stuff.
Well, it looks like you're not the only one who's excited. We already got Deshaun has chimed in here saying, let's go. And oh, I love that intro. Well, I love it
Hi,
too.
Deshaun.
Oh, Don, here's a buddy of mine. He knows we know each other from my other YouTube channel. We're not going to talk about that right now, but I'm glad to see Don's here, checked in as well. And look at that. All right, awesome
Good
sauce.
morning.
Okay,
Good morning.
all right. You know what? You know what amazed me a stat that I learned over the years. It's people go create new apps and all the time, whether you're using Start.Spring.io or whatever. But it seems to be after 10, 15 years of NoSQL advocacy, people are still reaching for relational databases like 80% of the time. I've seen sometimes it gets up to 90%, like 4 to 1, people still reach for relational databases. And the technology has been around since the 70s. I believe the original paper that put forth the idea of relational database and then the follow-up language to interact with SQL, that was in the 70s. It's like ancient times. And yet, why do people reach for it? And like Felipe, it's only you and me, developers, uh, business analysts, all kinds of people, program managers. I think, sometimes in court cases, like I've seen judges go and try to do a little homework while reviewing some of these tech cases. And there was during the whole Oracle Sun microsystem, the judge there was like writing, I think, Java code or something. So SQL is something that people can approach and get into. And it's kind of amazing the story. If you go look at Hibernate, which is the origin of JPA, Java Persistence API, it's people are wanting to just write their queries and make it simpler. Just what's the easiest data time on building like that. So, you know, and that's why we've I don't know if we're getting some alarms about our audio and video and stuff. So I don't know if we're having issues with our either our hosting our streaming service is doing that, or we do have some security tools in place that I'll have to take it back to tech support to converse on that. But before we get let's get going and just start building a Spring Data JPA application on top of CockroachDB. And then as we go through it, throw your questions up here and we will sit there and try and field them. So let's just start off right off the bat and build something right here from scratch, okay? And I'm going to use again my favorite payroll app because I mean, who doesn't like work? Who doesn't absolutely love working on an overhead-based application for your HR department? Now I'm going to use Maven. Hey, when you build your demo app, if you love Gradle, Kotlin, you go do that. But for the one we're going to do here, the lessons still apply. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to slim down this package name a little bit. We'll just call it com.cockroach labs, select start demo, and I'm going to hit next. Oh wait, has Boot come out? Boot's come out with a new release, so it's offer 342. So get your latest stuff here. Now the thing to remember with CockroachDB is it speaks Postgres wire protocol, so I definitely want that Postgres driver. Excuse me. And the other thing we're going to play around with is JPA, and that's through Spring Data JPA, and we'll get into that a little bit more, what that involves. And then finally, we're just going to build the simplest web controller we can find on top of all this. And that's all we need. Now, if you want to do templating, things like that, then you can get in that. If you're actually hanging it on a real website, then by all means. But for what we're going to do today, we're going to do this. Let's now, what I like about it is I can only share one screen at a time. So when that pop-up jumps to another, I have to bop around and get it and reshare it. I don't know if this will make a difference here. All right. Yeah. Deshaun has approved of Spring Boot 342. All right. Okay. Now, let me see. I recently installed JMeter on my box, and so every time I open a window, it's like, "Have you set it up? Have you set it up?" And it's like, we're not doing that right now. So here we go. We got a bare bones Spring app, and we have the parts we mentioned here. We got the Spring Data JPA starter. We've got Spring Web, and then we have Postgres here as a runtime dependency. So that just makes sure that the driver's online when we get going. Okay. Now let's unpack this thing and go in and, for any kind of data-oriented app, we need to start with defining our entity types, what the objects we're going to use. So I'm going to go create an employee class, and then I'm going to use the JPA, the Jakarta persistence entity type. All right. So we need to be able to tell JPA this is a data type that you need to do all your stuff for, okay? And let's define some attributes. And let's define them correctly. So here I've created basically a name and a role field, and that's kind of straightforward. Every person that's going to be in this, every employee needs to have a name and a role. And I'm sure you can think of other attributes you would need in your enterprise for that, or maybe you need a first name, last name, but we're keeping it simple here. But for primary key, we're going to use a standard UUID type, and that's because normally you may be used to, in a monolithic database system, use a sequence counter. You can delegate that to the database, and it'll increment stuff like that. But that's actually an anti-pattern when you get into distributed database systems. That's, it's a recommendation if you're building a greenfield project with CockroachDB to use UUIDs. And there's more about this, if you go sign up for the training, we delve into a lot of depths about this. But suffice it to say, this ensures that the keys are properly distributed across all the nodes that are going to be in your distributed enterprise. But that's no problem for JPA. I'm going to mark up this particular field so that JPA understands this is the ID, this is the primary key, and I'm even going to let JPA generate the values for me. And in fact, JPA knows it well enough that I actually have an annotation, a generation type for UUIDs. The other thing I like to denote is I like to have my, since this is a fresh new project we're just making, you can't see it because it's in another pop-up window, but I like to configure my code formatter. Now, one of the things here that JPA needs is it needs a constructor method. And it needs a constructor method for every field, because here's the deal. JPA is built on the mutable paradigm, not immutable, but mutable. So that means I need a constructor for all three attributes. Now you may have noticed that it's showing red here, and that's because it doesn't like the constructor has to be at least protected. Now it's still red because there's some other stuff here. They also want it to be they like it to be public, but it doesn't have to be public. I'd rather have people not use this unless it's explicitly called for. But what I'm going to do is, I thought I was going to assign them all. Okay, let's get them all in here. Oh, okay, I know. I remember. The other one is, and this is one of the hoops. They also need, one of the paradigms is JPA will res up an object with no constructor call, basically a default constructor call, and then use the set operations to set every value. So we need to create an empty constructor. So we're going to do that and just pass nulls in. And that one, yeah, so that got rid of the red. That is the one that needs to you can't make it private. If you make it private, it'll complain at you. So the red is back. So I either need to make this public or protected. So I vote for protected to try to give it minimum visibility. And it's this one I'm going to make public. So if somebody's got all three values, go ahead and let them come in here and populate them. And then I always like to have a third option is, what if I don't know the primary key? For example, what if I'm making the entity type up I have the person's name and their role, but I don't have a primary key yet because it hasn't been stored yet. So I'm going to make a constructor that serves that function. In that case, I'll just call back to the other one. All right, this is looking good so far. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the IDE to generate all my getters and setters.
And let me add a comment here, guys. If you review our past streaming, something that you may notice. Remember, we did the Spring Data JDBC, and for Spring Data JDBC, the difference here is that first of all, on the class employee, we needed to implement the persistable, right? So that was one of the clues there, meaning that we needed to override the is new attribute, right, in order for us to help the data JDBC to see, hey, this is a new. When you use a constructor, you normally you say yes, this is new. So practically, that's what we're doing. Now, another difference that we can notice here is that now we're using the Jakarta a kind of a properties or annotations in this case. And obviously on the JDBC data JDBC, we just use the Spring ID, for example, and the Spring table, right? So that was kind of the difference. And again, if you're curious, you can review and watch the previous stream we did with Spring Data JDBC, so you can see this difference. And probably after we finish with all the Spring Data part, probably we should have Greg, like a kind of combination with all the features and say, hey, this is what we did. Some of the key differences, so we can actually distinguish and see which one is better for us, right? It's going to be suitable for our business. So yeah, I wanted just to add that into this, creating this class.
No, that makes sense. That's a good one. Um, so I went ahead and while Felipe fleshed that point out, I went ahead and just let the IDE roll out. We need equals and hash code to kind of complete our POJO definition here, our plain old Java objects. So with this set up, we basically have got an entity type ready to roll. And so the next step in building, in talking to Spring Data JPA, speaking to Cockroach, is we need to create a repository definition. So I'm going to create what's called an employee repository. And again, this is the Spring Data paradigm. Is I'm going to create an interface here, and I'm actually going to lean into we already have a pre-baked one that's aimed at JPA. Now here I can go open this thing up. We can look at what this is. This, if you look at the top left corner here, this is from Spring Data JPA. This is not my code. This is another interface definition. Most notably, this is not a repository. So this tells Data JPA this is a source of definitions, but not an actual repository bean. And it comes with some JPA specific operations. In JPA, there's flushing that happens when the changes are stored in sort of a cache layer in the entity manager. And when the time is right, JPA will decide when to push that down to CockroachDB, when to actually make the changes, whether they're updates, inserts, what have you. But you have the authority at points of time to say, I want right now, I want to force it to flush. I don't want to depend on the entity manager, making a decision at this point. I want to, for example, save and flush right away. Suffice it to say, if you use that on absolutely every operation, performance will degrade. A lot of times you can depend on the entity manager to know when to issue the flush call, but sometimes you need to force it before you do a subsequent operation that depends upon that. And there's other, you can keep going up the hierarchy. So here we're in JPA, so there's flush specific operations. If you went to one of the other store modules that Spring Data supports, they don't have that concept. But we can go up the page or up the stack and find another interface definition called list CRUD repository. And this one's inside Spring Data Commons. This is inherited by all the data stores under the Spring Data umbrella. And it fundamentally has a save all operation where you can feed it basically a list of entities, a find all operation, and also find all by ID. You can supply a list of primary keys to go after. And if we follow this all the way up to the top, we find at CRUD repository, there's save all, find by ID, and then exist by ID. These are some of the basics here. And there's some delete stuff. And interestingly, if you go to the very top, you just get to an empty interface. So this is kind of the entire hierarchy of Spring Data's interface types. And all that to say is you actually have the full authority to go create an interface. You don't have to, if you just extend this thing, this is just a marker interface that tells Spring Data, this is a repository, act on it. And if you extend the repository, you would have none of those default definitions. Instead, you can start from scratch and say, I want a repository with nothing, and I will define it all. And you absolutely have that authority. That's your ultimate escape hatch, is you can go define all those things. Now let's go back to the one that we're building here, this employee repository. Now, like I mentioned, we already have a find all, and we basically have a save, find all, and find by ID, find all or find one, and then we have a save all or just save a single item. And that actually should be enough for us to actually load some data up. Now what I'm going to do is go create, let's go make a database loader. So I'm going to go make a new class, and it's going to have a single job, and I want it to load up our payroll department for this demo app. In order to do that, I'm going to mark it as a configuration class. This is a signal for Spring Boot that says, hey, you need to go look inside this class and res it up because it's got bean definitions in it. What kind of bean definitions? In this case, I'm going to leverage Spring Boot's command line runner, init database. And I just said bean definition. So I'm going to put an bean annotation on the method. So basically the message here to Spring Boot is instantiate this class. It contains bean definitions, and here's one of them. Go run this method after the app is up, okay? Or after the app context has been initialized. Invoke this thing. Now from a dependency injection perspective, what it's doing, it's calling for go find an instance of employee repository and inject it into this method when you create this bean. So it creates an ordering that says, before I can create this bean, first go create the employee repository, which Spring Boot will do on our behalf through auto configuration. And then inside it, what kind of bean definition is this? Well, this is a Java Lambda function that's going to get converted into a command line runner. Now, if you don't know what a command line runner is, you can just navigate to it in your IDE. It's a functional interface. It has a single method, run. And this is part of Spring Boot. You can see it up here in the top left corner. This basically says when the application is up and operational, Spring Boot will then iterate over all of its command line runners and just execute them. And it's going to feed it whatever the startup arguments were. So one of the things is you don't want to, you can't depend upon the order of the command line runners. So you're defining, hey, here's a little bit of code I want you to run when the app gets going. Here's another bit of code that was defined over here. Here's another bit of code over there. You can't have them coordinate with each other and assume what the order is, okay? So they're just a convenient way to launch some code. And in this case, what we want it to do is we're going to run this little bit of code, and we want it to create some new objects. So I'm going to make repository calls, and I'm going to create some new entities. Now ring bearer. Let's see, let's add some more people to our staff. Let's see, that's something to have in your team. You gotta have a burglar on hand. And you can't have Frodo unless you have Samwise Gamgee. So what this says is, okay, Spring Boot, run this bit of code. This bit of code is going to get its hands on the employee repository we just defined. And we already know that it has a save operation because that was defined up in the hierarchy in the CRUD repository. It's going to save an entity. And then we're saying, JPA, you decide when to run the flush operations. We don't need to get into the middle of that. There's no intense performance stuff begging for us to do that right away. Now, we're close, but not close enough yet to launch the application. We need to do a little bit of configuration here. So Spring Boot, we have access to this application.properties file. Now the thing I used to create the app went and created the application.properties file, and it preloaded it with the name of this app name, but we need a few more settings. For starters, we need to change the servlet port number that it's going to listen to, because normally by default it's port 8080, but port 8080 on CockroachDB on our machine that we're going to run it from defaults to running CockroachDB's visual console. So we need to pick a different port. Now, there's another thing we want this thing to do because it's a demo app. Every time I start the app, I want it to clean out the database and recreate it from scratch. Normally, that's something Spring Boot will do, but only if you're using an embedded database like HSQL or something like that. By default, it doesn't know to do that, so I'm going to tell it to do that with this setting, and I'm going to use the create setting, which says, every time I start it up, clear out the schema and recreate it based on the entity types. And we'll see that real shortly. I'm going to paste in a chunk here. I have some handy dandy notes here, which I'm going to set. This is basically how to configure a data source bean, which is a JDBC object, through property settings. Again, I'm going to use a JDBC URL, a Postgres one, and this is the port that my instance of CockroachDB is running on. And I happen to have created a database on that machine already. And in this case, we're running it in an unsecured mode, not something to do in production. Here I've set username and password. And then one of the things I had found kind of in digging through, and it's kind of buried in the documentation, is to get current JPA up and running, hibernate in this context, you need to flip this flag to true. It's just a little bit of a setting, and when we share the link to this GitHub repo after the show, you can be sure to have the setting. I'm going to put in a little bit more. One is I'm going to put in. We do have some notes in our ref docs about what your pool size should be. This is Hikari connection pool that Spring Boot configures automatically, and these are just some overrides on how big to size the connection pool. But if you're actually building a real CockroachDB cluster, there's a little more to it than that, but we're not going to go into that for today's demo purposes. And then finally, for a demo, I really like to dial up the log level. So let's just crank out and let's turn on logging on transactions on JPA, Data JPA on JDBC, also a bunch of Hibernate stuff. Let's just dial up the. Now at this point, I believe we have enough to actually run the application. So let's see what we can get. All right, nothing blew up. That's our first good sign. Yep, we got our nice Spring banner with version 3.4.2. I'm gonna, scroll over to the right here a little. We can see some of the Hibernate startup stuff. If I scroll down a little bit further, we can see that here we're starting to see some transaction activity. So begin a transaction. It's running it through, this is the utility class Spring Data JPA has under the hood. It's called Simple JPA Repository, and it's running the save method. And this is the actual Hibernate. What Hibernate, we're using JPA, but the default implementation when you pick Spring Data JPA is Hibernate, the JPA provider that's being used. So Hibernate's job is to translate generic SQL statement or generic Hibernate queries into SQL queries for the particular SQL implementation you're using. In this case, we're speaking PostgreSQL to CockroachDB. So it's generating an insert statement with binding parameters. And we can see it applying the bindings right here. So in this case, Hibernate was able to generate that UUID for us that we talked about. And it's a little bit of it committed. It looks like it committed before the insert, but that's just sort of a fluke of how the logging works. So it did all the insertion and the binding of parameters before it did the commit. And then it goes to and does another transaction. So it's inserting our second member of our staff here. And then finally down here, we can see the third one. And we can check this out. The app is still running. If I just hop over here to the terminal, here we go.
And before you do that, Greg, I just want to comment. I don't know. Again, please review our previous stream. And something that you may notice here on resources is that that's empty, right? Meaning like only the application properties is there. Or on Spring Data JDBC, normally you need to provide a schema SQL in order for the Spring Data JDBC to know how to create and do the mapping with the class. And in this case, Spring JPA, Data JPA practically does that for you automatically. It reviews what you have on your entities and automatically creates the whole thing. So, Greg, I don't know why you don't actually show them like
Yep, that's a good idea.
uh,
And
how we
why don't
create
we
the
go? I'm going
table.
to disable here. Let's just take this bean offline. Okay. We can take this bean offline. Let's restart this. So no new data is being created. And so if I look here and buried in here, I kind of blew past it, but you can see these statements here. It's doing drop table and it's doing a create table command.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not doing the rest. There's no new stuff being created. And if I go into the Cockroach shell,
Show create table
this is the
employee.
table
Yeah.
that just got created for us by JPA, by Hibernate. Do you want to put our little banner up that has the what we just typed? So
Yeah.
yeah, if you go,
Yeah,
this is when you
that's the
start getting
command.
into some of these commands can get database engine specific, but basically, if you want to look at a table, that's it right there. Let me scroll this up. Well, I can't scroll it up a little higher. Okay. So you can see the ID. It's a UUID field. It's not null. So it's UUIDs are. It's a. Okay, so we got the UID, we got a name, which it says it's a variable length string of length 255. It's nullable, it can be null. We have a role, and it has to put that in double quotes because role is a reserved word. So we have something called a role. It's a string, and then it's got a constraint that it's created. Employee primary PK. It's a primary key, and it's applied to the ID field. So this gives all the semantic information for CockroachDB to know how to treat this and where the primary key is. And if I select against it, I'm going to see it's empty. So we don't even have any data yet. Now if I turn this bean back on, I'm going to restart the app. Remember, so I should see again, I configured it every time to drop and recreate. So if I scroll up top, I can again see drop, create table. Only now we see the stuff we were looking at before where it's going to create the entries. So if I do that select star this time, I can see the three entities that were created. And you notice it happens. Here's something. I don't know if you noticed this, Felipe. The way the output was given to me, it's sorted by the ID. And you'll notice
Yeah,
that's
that's
not
one
the
of the
same
cool
order
things.
I created them in. In the code, it goes Frodo, Bilbo, Samwise, but here it's a different order, but it's sorted by ID. Because what CockroachDB does is under the hood, it's a key value store. And it's storing everything The key is what the primary key is in this kind, or a representation of the primary key. There's a one-to-one relationship between what the actual key looks like, but it's got that UUID buried in it. Because in a key value store, you need to be able to search by keys. And to make search work, to use a binary search, the data has to be sorted. That way it can jump to the middle of the data store, and either it's above it or below it. So it can fill away half the table and then jump to the next chunk by chunk, and get to it. And so that's why we have it sorted. I'm going to flip back to where we're looking at the code here. Oop, there, that's a little easier to read. Now, what it's doing is when CockroachDB makes a table, it creates what's called a primary index. So there's already an index made for you, and the index is on the primary key. So if you don't put an order by clause on it, this is the order it will come back to you in, is the order of the primary index, which is sorted on the ID column. There's kind of this rule about if you do a select statement and there's no order by, there's no guarantee of what the order is going to be. And that's generally true. If you're going to take a select statement and go from database carrier to database carrier, the ordering can vary. But if you understand what's happening under the hood, it makes sense. But if you want something to be ordered by something else and guarantee it, especially when you start to have multiple ranges coming back to you because you're in a distributed system, then you really need to use an order by. Now, we don't need to go into sorting anymore, but I can also, just to show this, I can go order by name, and I can order it by the name or whatever. Now let's start doing let's do a little bit more fun here. And let's go hook up a web controller. For this one, I didn't pick a templating engine, so I'm just going to make a REST-based controller. So let's call it API controller. Now, in the olden days, you used to have to put auto-wired on this kind of stuff, but no longer. Instead, if Spring Boot sees a controller class come up that it needs to create, and there's only one constructor, it's going to pick it automatically and do any auto-wiring it needs to do. So let's create a find all. Now the find all method already exists. We have mentioned it, and I don't know if you missed it or not, but this is in that list CRUD repository up the hierarchy of Spring Data up here in Spring Data Commons. We already have a find all method defined. Notice it's an interface definition. It doesn't say how to do it. That's for the implementation of Spring Data to resolve. In this case, the simple JPA repository will do that for us. So we already have this method defined on our behalf. All we need to do is hook it to the correct web route. In this case, we're going to make it a get call. Oops, don't put that there. And right there, if I just restart that, that should be enough that I'm going to restart the app. Let's keep the controller up here. I can see it. I'm going to open another shell here. And then let's go curl. Remember, we're doing it on port 8000. Oops, I've been typing HPS so much recently I forgot to leave it out because we're running unsecured. I'm going to get back all this. I get all the headers and whatnot back. And I get this dense JSON packet at the end. Kind of hard to read. So I actually have this utility I use all the time called JQ to prettify it. Let me push this up a little. So now I see I've got a JSON array, or sorry, a JSON list, well, array list, whatever. And it's got the 3 entities. And you notice, okay, I've restarted it. If you're looking close, you may notice that the IDs have changed again because each time I'm restarting the app, it's generating new UUIDs because essentially it's their new rows of data. But you notice they are coming to me ordered by PK because that's just the nature of the beast. Now I could actually go and alter that if I wanted to, but let's build a little more of our web controller. Oops, I didn't mean to. I double clicked it. Okay, I didn't know to do that. Okay. Let's go write what's called a custom finder. Okay, so far I can find by ID. That's already there. Let's go look for one. Oop, nope, not an employee repository. And it doesn't add it to the imports. Okay. It's going to tell me that I'm actually going to get back an optional. Let's handle that. Let's do a constructor. New runtime exception, can't find employee with ID. So we'll do it where we're either going to get we're actually going to get the employee, or let's throw an exception and see what happens. Okay. So I should be able to then restart the app.
Don't forget the get mapping.
Oh, good. Yeah. I need my little sad trombone sound effect here.
And the path variable.
Yeah, that's right. Let's see. ID. See, this is the benefits of pair programming here. This is pair programming live. Alrighty, so okay, I can see the path, the web controller up here. I'm going to go run the same curl command I just did a second ago, so I can see the data here. I keep typing that. Okay, localhost 8000 API employees, and then let's go grab one of them here. Let's paste it in and let's pipe it through JQ. And there we go. Not a list, a single item, a single piece of JSON here with Frodo Baggins, fetched by primary key. Now, where was this find by ID method? Again, this was part of Spring Data Commons, and you can see it returns an optional type. And this all, or I can find one, but what it doesn't give me is something in between. And usually anything about relational databases is writing the queries. So I'm going to go create a new query. I'm thinking about fetching more than one, and I'm going to do what's called a finder. And I can just use, now it's hard to show this on a live stream, but you actually get code completion in my IDE. And I think most modern IDEs have support for Spring Data, that it will pop up, and the IDE can see the type. This is an employee type. It can recognize the attributes that are visible and will help you do code completion to do find by role. So what Spring Data will do is it will read that method. It will parse it. It will see the find by tokens, and then it chops up the rest of it. It says, oh, that's role. You're looking at the role. And then if I just put it in here, it'll write the query for me. And I don't have to do anything more than that. And I can prove it by going here and making a web controller that uses it. Find by role. Actually, it doesn't matter what I call that, but string role. Return repository find by role. Oh. And again, I need to hook it up to the machinery. And the path variable. So this is just good old Spring MVC we're doing here. And if I go restart the whole thing, you can see it zipping through. Now, if I look for one of those keys, that's probably not going to be there because all the keys have changed. Okay, so we can still see, we still have these three entities. They have new keys because we restarted everything. But now I should be able to do my specialized search. So I want to search by role. Let's pick burglar because that's a simple one-word thing, and it gives me back. It's a list. It's a JSON list with one entry. Baggins, or searched on burglar and got me Bilbo Baggins. What if I wanted to search for ring bearer? Well, I can't put a space here like that because it's going to break curl. So I need to encode it, which this encoding for a space is %20. So if I do that, then I get back my Frodo Baggins ring bearer. Let's see if we can, let me see if I can make another one. Let's go make another finder. Okay, here we're up in the game. I'm going to search by name, but I'm going to add a qualifier, containing. So this means it's going to actually, it's going to do a query, a where clause against the name, but it's going to put wildcards on each side, so I can get a partial match on it. And let's go make a controller for that. So let's go create that. Let's go call it employees name, and I'm going to call it search. Let's match this up, otherwise I have to do some extra settings. So let's look at this one, and then we'll regroup and take a look at it again. So if I restart all this, okay. This query should still work. Find by role. What I just did here was to find by role. Oh, I didn't mean to. I clicked on the link. Okay. But let's do that other one. Let's search on Gamgee. Well, what did we get? We got an error. What happened? I'm not sure what happened. I don't see it. Oh, it just said, well, it just said error not found. And I have to see if I've done it correctly. Where's the data? GMG, I thought I spelled it correctly. All right, let's see what if we can get. Oh, no, that's because I see let me go back to the controller method. Name, here's the problem. Let's put the path variable designation in there. All right, restart that. Okay, now we're back to operational. So I fed it a path of this token. It took it apart, it extracted it and put it into the machinery, and then it fed it to my thing, which did a partial match on it. In this case, it matched the ladder. I should be able to search for the Baggins. And if I do that, I get two, Bilbo Baggins and Frodo Baggins. Now, they both are at the end. If I just search on the token bag, it's still going to match because it's putting wildcards on both ends. But you can also clarify and say it's a starting with or ending with kind of search. So there's a lot of stuff here. And if you go dig into the documentation on Spring Data JPA, it shows you all the kind of operations you can do with Spring Data. I'm looking. We've got some comments here. Let's see. Let's catch up here. And yeah, Deshaun was asking. There's no schema.sql required, and nope, not with JPA. That's a feature that JPA does. That's not what Spring Data is doing. That's what JPA offers. Is it will create your schema for you if you need it, and it's a JPA setting to do that. Yeah, that is pretty handy. Um, is there a CockroachDB test container? I don't know this. I think there is,
Yes,
but I'm not totally certain. Oh, you know
yes,
that one?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I answered while you were doing the code. Yes, of course we
Ah,
have that.
okay. Oh, that's okay. Shut up. Let's check here. Oop. Yep. All right. You're Felipe's taking notes here. Yeah, and I was just going to share here. You already answered Don, but for production system, would you want the ID to be null? If not, would you ensure it is not null with the Jakarta annotation? And uh, you fed that. When we're saying null in the context of Spring Data application, it's a signal in Spring Data that this is an entity not yet stored. Okay.
Yes.
So essentially, it's to take the extra information to the entity provider to say, okay, here's one that's not yet created. You need to manage this. Now, if you go and use the Hibernate or the JPA APIs directly, you need to be aware of some of these nuances.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right. This is why you can't. When I run it by myself, I'm operating with one hand behind my back. So I was super stoked when, like, the first week on the job, Felipe was like, "Can I get in on this?" And I said, "Come on board, man." Now, this is not the only. So we've covered a lot of ground here. So we've built a data. Let me keep up to the mic here. We've built a Spring Data JPA app with Boot. We've got to the find all, find by ID, find one, find many. We've written a couple custom finders, but eventually you run into a situation where you're writing some kind of really crazy query. Like, I've seen like 3-page queries where you're joining 20 tables together to build data warehouse stuff, and you find out that I need to work with the DBA who understands the data better. And this person doesn't speak Hibernate. They don't know what Hibernate query language is, and I'm not expecting them to know what that is. Instead, we need to write some pure SQL, or we need to take full advantage of the platform that we're on. One of these things is, what if I need to write a follower query? This is an operation where it's like, I want to query, but I'm going to take advantage of the fact that CockroachDB holds on to by default, the last 4 hours of the state of the system. I can say, I want to select against this table. I want to do this join operation. And the whole thing is based on the state of the system 5 minutes ago, something like and it's called a follower read, because if you're looking at the state of the system, if it's at least 5 seconds ago or longer, you don't have to go to the leaseholder to get the answer. In a distributed database, oh, all right, Don, thanks for coming by. We'll see you in the next live stream. Cheers. So in a distributed database, there's a great website out there called Secret Lives of Data. You can go Google for it, and it explains how the RAF protocol that CockroachDB is built on. How does it coordinate changes? So if you have 3 replicas for every piece of data in the system, how does it coordinate it? Well, there's one of those replicas is called the leaseholder, and all inserts and updates are processed through the leaseholder, and it then coordinates with the other replicas. So it fits that once something has been committed, if you want to get the latest status and not wait for the syncs to happen with the other replicas, you go back to the leaseholder to query it for the answer. But there's a trade-off with that. If you're in San Francisco, but the leaseholder is in London, you're going to have to make a long distance call to get the current state of the system. But if you say, give me the state of the system 5 seconds ago, when the updates will have percolated all the way back to San Francisco to your local area, you can say, do that. Just let me go to the nearest replica. Let me go to this replica that's in the same data center as me, and I'll get the answer there. I realize the answer is 5 seconds old, but 5 seconds ago, that's a good enough answer for what I'm looking for. And that's called a follower read. And that's a slightly different type of select statement than what you would normally do. Let's put this up here and we can talk about what we're doing and then back it into our application. So now I was playing around with the app. Let's go back to our SQL shell so we can see what we're talking about here. So I'm doing something like this, a select star from employee where role equals ring bearer. So I get that, and I get this person back. I think it's, let me put it here, as it says, as of system time minus 5 seconds. See if I typed it correctly. I did. I couldn't remember if I have to put the as of system time before or after the where clause. Let me just see if that's where role equals ring bearer as of system time minus 5 seconds. Yeah, okay, you have to do it the first way. So I need to make note of that. So what this is saying is do the query the same as always, but I want to look at what the state of the system was 5 seconds ago. What if I deleted from, like, let's see what this happens if I say delete from employee where role equals ring bearer. Okay, so I've deleted an entry. Now, if I look for the latest status of the system, select star from employee, I can see that I'm down to 2 entries, okay? But if I look, select star as of system time, let's pick a bigger value, minus 60 seconds. If I look back in time 60 seconds, I'm going to see that I have 3 rows. And I can see that if I do a select star from employee as of system time minus 60 seconds, where role equals ring bearer, I still got that entry. Let me take a slow sip of my coffee here, because I don't know if 60 seconds have passed yet. Let me trim it down to 30 seconds here so we don't drag this out. If I look 30 seconds back, that row is now gone, because there's basically that window, that delete has finally slipped back to where that's been more than 30 seconds ago. So this is a way for me to look back in time. And so this is why some people also call it a time travel query. The irony with calling it a follower read query is I don't have to go to the leaseholder, I can go to one of the followers, but I'm running a single node instance of CockroachDB on my laptop. So I'm going to there are no followers in this setup, but we can still call it a follower read. The 60 seconds is probably past too. Okay. And so it becomes, well, how do I write this select statement? Because Hibernate doesn't support this. Let me just put it right there. Well, let me say JPA doesn't support this. Hibernate's a superset of JPA. Neither of them actually have support for as of system time queries, so we just can't do that. So there's no way to go into this repository and use the built-in features. Let's just call it find recent. We don't have that. Find recent employees. Now we did role. We did find recent by role. Let's call it that. So the idea is we need to write it ourselves, and for this we have the glorious query annotation. So basically, I'm just going to type in what I did right now, right down below. As of system time minus, let's do that 30 seconds, where role equals, let's see if I've got it.
It's the colon role.
Okay. I'll try to remember how to do that. Okay. And here's the thing. You can type in what you want to. By default, that's going to be a Hibernate query that you hand rolled, but I am going to tell it this time, in this context, it's a native query. So in this case, I'm basically signaling I don't want Spring Data to try to make the query. I don't want JPA to try to make the query. I'm writing the query myself. So it's kind of like I'm skipping over, instead of going into these different parts, I'm going to skip all the way over, and right at the last second before the query is shipped out to the entity manager, it's going to plug it in itself. If you use JPA APIs directly, you can also do native queries. And for this, let's hook it up to a web controller method and see how it looks. Let's call this API employees role. Let's call this recent role. At this point, it doesn't really matter what you call the methods. It's just for our convenience more than anything. Now, this should do the trick. Let me make sure we've got it up here. And let's restart. Let's restart our app here. Oops. Is it... Okay, let's stop and rerun the app. Okay, so again, we should have all of our data here in the tables, so we can see that. All right. Some of our old operations should still be here, so we can still find, we can search on partial tokens. The IDs have rolled because again, we've restarted the application. That's cool. But let's check out our latest. Sorry, going into select statements. So let's go to localhost 8000 API employees. Let's go to recent role, and we were doing ring bearer. So %20. So far I can see that. And if I actually go over to the run window where I've dialed up all the log levels, I can see what the things, I can see here's a log message from Hibernate, org.hibernate.sql. It's doing my native query right here. Notice how it's transformed. We used a named parameter, :role. And here it's able to transform it into a binding parameter. And our thing got through. So it's passing what we want it to do onto the engine. So it's still there. I should be able to now do that delete operation. Delete from employee where role equals ring bearer. So you can see we're down to 2. But if I run this operation, I can still see the entry. It's still there. Now if I go back and if I search for that Baggins, if I do that Baggins search, it doesn't have the as of system time. So it's now paired it back to just Bilbo Baggins. But if I do that follower read query, it's going to give us that. And for a little bit more. Let me take a belated coffee sip here. There, and then this time I fetch it, and we've passed the 30-second window. So now the delete is finally past the purview of this operation. We can see, if I scroll down, it's run it several times here, but it's basically, this is our, cool escape hatch where we can really plug in anything we want to do, and that's really handy where we can go leverage JPA to do what we want it to do as much as we want it to do, and then we can cut out of it when we need to do something more specific than that. If you're going to collaborate with a couple other people, with a business analyst that also probably doesn't speak Hibernate, this is a handy way to let me knock out the easy queries and let JPA or Spring Data JPA do that for me, get that off the table, and then let's sit down and knuckle down on the really complicated stuff and work those out. So, by the way, if you're still with us and you're getting value out of this, go ahead and smash the like button, and then be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. That way you don't miss any more episodes. If you're wanting to get your hands on CockroachDB and play around with it some more, there is a great place you can go to. There's a QR code, and it just takes you to this link, university.cockroachlabs.com. And we have a bunch of several online courses you can take. It's free. You can get your hands on some of that. It doesn't have this code in it. It's some stuff that's already existing, but you learn about distributed SQL, some other good stuff. There's some really neat courses on multi-region, which we're not covering today, but it's something you get into, which is if I've got a distributed database and I've got a region on the West Coast, on the East Coast, and in Central Europe, 3 regions, surely I can get some benefit out of that from a failure recovery perspective. And also maybe there's some optimization. Like imagine, what if your data was of the nature that it was regional? like you have some kind of you're brokering deals where people are going and picking up food at a local restaurant and bringing it to your apartment or your house nearby. Those people are probably, if you're in San Francisco, they probably don't need to go to the restaurants in New York. Instead, they need to see a subset. Show me the data that's in my area. Show me this regionalized data. This is something that you can do it. You can go do it yourself on any database. It's kind of tricky, but with CockroachDB, it becomes a snap. And in this place, Cockroach University, there's 2 courses that introduce you to multi-region capability, and it's really a lot of fun to play with. Now, is there some other, I didn't know if there was some other stuff we were missing on this, Felipe.
No, I think you cover everything. And yeah, and some of the questions, yes, I'll we're gonna work for you guys to get you into test containers probably after this set of streamings, because we want to cover more stuff, right? With Spring Data, we already did JDBC. This time is JPA, and the next time it will be what, Greg, like JDBC client.
Oh, do you want to? Do you think we need to? Should we share it? Let's put up. Oh, wait. Let me. Oh, I can't share a file. I have to open the file before I can share it on the thing. This is the fun stuff. Now, I hadn't thought about this, but I went and actually talked with the shop and found out how diligently these people were using it. So I said, you know what? We need to do a session where we're going to talk about just pure raw good old JDBC template. So you like my look on there. I was talking with the customer and I was like, are y'all using Spring Data JPA? And they're like, no, we're not using, nothing wrong with Spring Data JPA, but in their situation, they were optimizing and squeezing literally every millisecond out that they could. So they were using JDBC template in the raw and some other stuff. So that's definitely coming up on the show. Not today's episode, but that's coming on the live stream in the future. We're gonna tackle that. And Felipe and I were kicking it around about, we also need to tackle JDBC client. That's the latest. If you're familiar with REST template and then what came out a couple years ago, REST client, a sort of a overhauled version. This is the equivalent of JDBC template and JDBC client. Some really slick stuff there to cover. And I'm stoked about that. We're also gonna delve more into multi-region in some future shows as well. So if all this sounds cool to you, be sure to hit the like and subscribe so you don't miss anything on the channel.
Yeah, and if you allow me, Greg, I'll share the URL for our GitHub.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. If you go here to GitHub, select start show, we have all the code and we're going to start adding more stuff. So you guys are complete on what we are showing here.
Yep, you can get it, download it. You can go install CockroachDB for free. Go play around with it at home. And hey, if there's issues on those repos, you can go ahead and file tickets and we'll get to them as best as we can. So let us know. And thanks for coming out for today's episode. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
This episode is over, but your learning has just begun. Visit CockroachLabs.com to find all kinds of content to expand your knowledge.